being willing to be persistent is one of the keys. It will happen. Just keep showing up every day, keep being willing to do the work, and great things happen.
This podcast encourages and empowers you to create your own unique real story, develop your own unique real statement, and discover your own unique real self. The power is yours. Good afternoon, Jody Maberry. Previously, episode 332 of the 12-Minute Convos podcast. It's been just 2 years, 10 months, and 20 days since we last had a conversation.
If there's something that you're curious about, just go out and find more. Find somebody that has done what you want to do and reach out to them.
That was then. This is now. How are you doing, Jody?
I'm doing wonderful. It's so good to talk to you again. And it feels like it's only been like 2 years and 6 months. It doesn't feel like that long.
Well, you know what's really intriguing? If I'm not mistaken, given the calculation there, I would think the last time we spoke was exactly at this time. That's cool, isn't it?
It is. It's very cool. Yeah.
You're a creature of habit, are you?
I am.
Well, the last time we spoke, we covered a ton of material, a ton of things that you were doing. Give us an update. Let's start from the podcast you produced and host.
Well, there has been so much happen, and let's just round it up and call it 3 years. There has been a lot go on in 3 years. I had maybe a couple podcasts back then. I've got 8 podcasts going now.
Wow.
I get the opportunity to speak. I've ended up traveling the world. There has been so much wonderful things happen. And I thought life was great when we talked 3 years ago. Had no idea, couldn't have even imagined how much better, how good things would be going 3 years from when we talked.
That is beautiful. I'm so glad to hear that. You've now created your magic, right? Pun intended. The show you were doing then was creating Disney magic. Well, do give us an update. Like, how is it feeling to look back from now to then and see what you've created?
Well, I'll tell you what, it is a lot of fun to look back and be in such an unexpected place because 3 years ago, I had an idea of what I was doing. I thought I knew where things would be heading. And it's just taken such a different shift. Things that I couldn't have even planned on have happened. And I think there's something to be said there on how important planning is, but you also have to be open to saying yes when new opportunities come. And that has been a real treat for me. Now, we're still doing the show, Creating Disney Magic. It's had over 250 episodes. It has just done wonderful. It's led to a lot of fun opportunities there, and we've created courses, and we've done speaking events together, Lee Cockrell and I, who I do that show with. And man, we've done episodes live in front of crowds, which is the energy there is great. And I've got the Jody Maberry show now, which I can't remember if I had that back then.
I think you had that. I think it was new though. I think it was like you getting into that. Yeah, just starting.
Yeah, well, that's gone great. The Park Leader Show is a show for park rangers. My very first podcast, that's still going strong. And I just returned from speaking at the State Park Directors Conference. So once a year, all the directors of the state parks in the United States, they get together and they ask some people to come and speak to them. And I was one of their speakers this year. And that all came from having a podcast, the Park Leader Show. It's just amazing the opportunities that come when you're willing to put yourself out there and talk and help people. Great things happen. But you know that. I'm so delighted to see where things have come for you in the last 3 years.
Yeah, I even saw and peeked in there and saw a picture with one of my great friends, Jamie. You are there at Podcast Movement with Jamie, Chris Nehemiah, and a few others that I know pretty well within the podcasting space. It's like, how amazing is that, right? Like, how we connected virtually and now we're connecting face to face. It's amazing, isn't it?
It sure is. And the world keeps getting smaller. That's what I feel like. The more that you talk, the more that you put yourself out there, the world just keeps getting smaller. like you just pointed out, you end up meeting people who know people that you know from somewhere else, and it gets better, it gets smaller. There's magic around every turn, it feels like.
I love that. There's definitely magic around it. We grew up looking at Disney movies and we believed, right? And it's interesting because things like Star Trek, where things where people were talking to people with their communicators, right? And we were told, well, that's not real. But look at where we are today. It's magical, isn't it?
It sure is. Yeah, it sure is. And just like I was saying with my life, in 3 years, I'm in places I couldn't have imagined 3 years ago. I think there in technology. A few years ago, I couldn't have imagined some of the things that we get to do now. And a decade ago, I never would have imagined I'd be on the line with you, different parts of the world. It's a great time to be out there, that's for sure.
Now, the spirituality side. So, mentally, things have been affected in you making decisions, those that were impacted by what your grandparents taught you in business, right? You stepping into business as well. Spiritually, how do you surround yourself to help that aspect of you?
Well, I think you hit on the right word, and that's surround yourself. And the busier I get, maybe you felt this, the busier I get, the more important it is to continue to surround myself with the right people who can help not only in business, but also with the spiritual side to feel like somebody's got my back, somebody's watching over me and making sure I'm doing what I should be doing. And I have people to talk to, and also, one thing that I've started doing that I didn't do back when we had our first conversation, because of the wonderful times we live in, is there were times where I would struggle to always find time to read my Bible, the busier it got. But now there's even a podcast for that where somebody reads it to me every day
All right.
and,
Wow.
and
What's the
talks
name
about
of
it.
that? Tell us the name of that.
Yeah, it's called 1 Year Daily Audio Bible.
All right.
So he breaks it down to get through it in an entire year. And I'm on my second year of doing that. So every day he reads parts and then we'll talk about it. And that has been a big help for me because even if I can't find time to sit down and read myself, well, I've got somebody
Someone to
reading it
read
to
it for
me.
you. That's beautiful. Support is such an important aspect of all that we do. When we last spoke, I think it was 16 years. Yeah, I think you were on 16 years of marriage, so puts you around 19 years. Is that correct, or are you on 16 now?
No, you're right. It was 16 last time we talked. So we're 19 now, and we're just a couple months away from hitting 20 years.
Wow. How has that been an impactful part of what you've become?
Oh my goodness. It's got to be one of the most important parts. And here's my favorite thing looking back over 19 years is when I was 24 years old and got married, my wife had no idea who I would be 19 years later, nor did I have any idea who she would be 19 years later. And I can look back and say it would be so easy, and I know this happens a lot. It would be so easy to grow apart because every few years you're a completely different person in so many ways than you were earlier. And over 19 years, think of how much is different. And I think that's a testament to how wonderful my wife is that I can go through all the changes I have, and we still have a strong relationship. And likewise, she's gone through a lot of changes. And if you're not paying attention, if you're not deliberate, it's so easy to grow apart in that amount of time.
Totally agree. I totally agree. Now, there are two children in the midst there running around. All right. They're teenagers now. Well, one is a teenager, right? How has podcasting affected them and what you're doing speaking?
Well, that's been one of the great parts and one of the tough parts. The great part about it is that they get to see what's possible. That if you're willing to put yourself out there and take a risk, that great opportunities come. Now, the downside, as those great opportunities come, I'm gone a lot. Often more than I would like to be, but sometimes there's opportunities you just can't pass up. But I just make sure that I am as deliberate as I can be, and when I'm home, and the quality of time when I'm home is important. Now, I know that can't always make up for quantity of time, But we just have a great time when I'm here.
So the physical side of things, though, Jody, like when we last spoke, one of the things you indicated is, you just joined the gym. So you were hitting the gym, right?
That's right.
How is the physical aspect of you going?
Well, the physical aspect is better. I only stayed with the gym for a year, but I'm on over 3 years of walking 10,000 steps or more every day. And that's
Wow.
tremendous. There's a story in itself there, but I'm probably 25 pounds lighter than when we talked last time. I'm
So,
feeling great. I'm active. I just spent a week in the wilderness of Glacier National Park, and in 5 days, I kept track. We walked in 5 days over 150,000 steps, more than 50 miles, climbed the equivalent of 801 flights of stairs as we were going up and down mountains.
hmm.
So I will tell you, I am feeling so much better physically than when we talked 3 years ago. So I'm glad to report that.
I love it. I'm like your podcast accountability partner here, right? Are you doing what you said you would do? Yeah, it gives me joy. It gives me joy, tremendous joy, to be able to reconnect and hear that you have not given up, that you've remained consistent. It is both motivating and inspiring, not to me, but for those listening that go back to the previous episode to hear where you were then and then to hear where you are today. So, Jody, again, thanks for all that you do. In closing, is there anything else you'd like to share with our amazing audience?
Well, I just want to give you the message that being willing to be persistent is one of the keys. That's what I have found out over the last 3 years, that you show up every day, you're patient, things will come, you're persistent, you're just willing to keep showing up. And I think that's a big lesson I've learned since we talked 3 years ago. Patience and persistence is so important. So it will happen. Just keep showing up every day, keep being willing to do the work, and great things happen.
Love it. Again, amazing audience. Jody Maberry. Jody, thank you, my friend, for being on what is inspired by 12-minute convos with Angel Jones. This podcast is produced by Pod Edits. Visit podedits.com for professional podcast publishing.